Good morning, everybody. Please follow along in the notes as I present them in this PowerPoint. Today we are learning about the 13 colonies and the British Empire. So yes, there was a lot of people from different countries that came, like the Spanish and the Portuguese and the Dutch and the French, but we're mostly going to be focusing on the English settlers that came to the Americas because that's where the United States started from. So from 1607 to 1733, the British established 13 distinct colonies along the Atlantic coast. So along the Atlantic Ocean, there was 13 British colonies that came and established themselves here and succeeded. They're all very different. They all started for different reasons, and we're going to learn about those reasons briefly today. Over time, three types of colonies existed. These three types were corporate. So some of the colonies were established for money, for corporate reasons, to make money and bring it back to England. For royal reasons, where the crown wanted to control other parts of the world and show its influence. So these colonies were established to bring pride and power to the royal crown. And as a reward, as proprietary, where the king offered these colonies or this land to his buddies, to his entourage. So they were controlled by individuals, and they started for a variety of reasons. So we're going to learn about those three today by going into each one of them very briefly. We're going to start off with the most famous one where the United States actually started from. We learned about it last week, Jamestown, Virginia. So Jamestown was the first successful English colony, and it was established as a corporate colony for profit. So people that came to establish Georgetown came to make money off of it. They wanted to get crops and corn and everything to make money and bring it back to England. In the beginning, however, due to mismanagement and bad luck, it struggled to survive. So they had a really hard time surviving. However, thanks to their leader, John Rolfe, and his wife, Pocahontas, yes, the Disney movie based on her, a new crop was harvested that brought in a lot of money. So it paid off. All that misery eventually paid off thanks to the growing of tobacco. Tobacco was a new crop in the Americas that the English were crazy about. So it brought in a lot of money. Plymouth, Massachusetts was the second colony. It was established along the Massachusetts Bay, so up here. It was established for religious reasons. So Virginia was for money, for corporate. Plymouth, Massachusetts was for religious reasons. So it was a time where England was having a lot of problems financially, religiously. So a lot of people felt persecuted, and there was a lot of conflicts because we were breaking away from the Catholic Church. So what a lot of people started to do, and what the king permitted them to do, is, hey, you Protestants, hey, you very religious Catholics that don't agree with my Church of England, why don't you guys go to the New World and kind of be on your own? So he was trying to get rid of the problem. So Massachusetts hence was born. There was two types of people that came to Massachusetts. The first type of people were called separatists, and they believed that the Church of England was corrupt, and they wanted to completely separate from it. So the reason that they came to the Americas is that they wanted to separate from the English Church, and they landed in Massachusetts. The second type of people that came, they landed on the Mayflower and the Plymouth Rock. So the Pilgrims and that song that you guys remember from elementary school about the Mayflower, those were the separatists. The second type of people that came were the Puritans. The Puritans also landed in Massachusetts, but they were a little bit more connected to the Church of England. So they didn't want to separate from it. They wanted to purify it. Get it? Puritans. So they wanted to purify the Church of England. And in order to do that, they needed like a fresh start. So they came to America, to the Americas, and landed on Massachusetts Bay. So those were the people that landed here. There was early political institutions in these colonies, which means that the colonies began to take steps towards self-rule. These are steps that eventually are going to lead us to the American Revolution. They were very independent right off the bat. So they weren't controlled by the crown. Even though they were under the control of the king, they pretty much were doing their own thing. One of the examples is the House of Burgesses in Virginia. So in Virginia, they started to form their own government. The first known government in the colonies was the House of Burgesses in Virginia, and they practiced representation. So representation, they brought men that could vote, and they could decide on the issues of the colony. Don't get too excited about the House of Burgesses. They also made slavery legal. The Mayflower Compact was another form of government in Massachusetts, and it basically allowed everybody to have a voice. What I mean by everybody is white men with land in the colony's decisions. Like I said, there was limits. So only white male property owners could vote. So everybody in this room, in this class, would not be able to vote if this was 1619. So only white male property owners could vote. The Chesapeake colonies include Maryland and Virginia. So Maryland and Virginia, these two colonies right here. Maryland became the first proprietary colony under the Lord Baltimore and safe havens for Catholic. How do you remember this? It's called Maryland, like the Queen, like the Virgin Mary. So it was established as a proprietary colony. It was given to a specific person for helping out the king. So Lord Baltimore was one of the king's homies. So as a reward for supporting him in his rule, he gave him the land, the colony of Maryland. And because he was a devoted Catholic and he knew that they were having problems in Europe with the Catholics, he decided to found Maryland for a safe haven for his people, for his religious group. However, over time, a lot of different groups, especially Protestants, started to move to Maryland. So the Catholics, again, were being persecuted. So what happened was that they passed the Act of Toleration. And this was a good thing because it allowed religious freedoms to all Christians. But again, eventually it failed. Religion was a big deal back then, you guys. In these colonies, as we're going to learn, there was labor shortage. So yes, we have all this land and all this property, but if we have nobody to help us with it, nobody to work it, then it's just useless. So there was 3 types of labor sources that existed in the colonies. We have indentured servants. You probably remember this from last year, which means that, hey, if I'm a poor person and I want to go to the Americas to maybe like see what I could do over there, but I have no money, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a rich person, a rich landowner, and see if they could fund my way to the Americas, and I will pay them back by giving them by labor. It's usually for 7 years. So what that would mean is that for an indentured servant for 7 years would work the land and be under the Lord's control, and then eventually they would get their freedom, and then after that they could work for a wage or move out and do their own thing. We had the head right system. Remember, we're trying to get more people to the Americas because the more people that are populated, the more you control it. And we're trying to make British control all this area. So if you, the king was offering 50 acres of land for each person that came. What that means is that if you made it to the Americas, we will give you free 50 acres of land. How big is an acre? 1 acre is the size of a football field. So imagine 50 football fields just because you came to this new world. Again, we're trying to populate it and take care of it ourselves. And last but not least is the saddest one that kind of still identifies the United States today is slavery. African slaves, Native American slaves, and other forms of slavery that existed in the United States. And we're going to talk about that more in future lessons. We have the development of New England, the New England Territory. These include Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. Rhode Island. So Rhode Island, this little tiny one over here, was founded by Roger Williams, and he was actually a very really famous religious man from Massachusetts. So he didn't land in Rhode Island, he landed in Massachusetts. But because they were very, very mean to other religions, and he believed that the rules of Massachusetts was too strict, he decided to leave and found the colony of Rhode Island. Rhode Island became the first colony without an official religion, because remember, Roger Williams was a very religious man. He truly believed that nobody should be persecuted based on what they believe. So he founded Rhode Island. We have Connecticut right next to it. It formed the first known written constitution in the Americas. So it was the first written constitution in the Americas. So again, self-government, we're starting to rule ourselves. It was originally part of Massachusetts. New Hampshire was originally part of Massachusetts. But eventually the king kind of split it up because, again, he wanted to make it a royal colony. He wanted to make it he wanted to have more direct control, and if he made it a royal colony, it was directly under his control, and he could appoint a governor to control it that would do everything he said. So the reason New Hampshire exists is because it was split from Massachusetts. Okay, last slide. The restorative colonies, North and South Carolina, were granted to 8 nobles. Again, the king rewarded his buddies, his entourage, who helped the king of England gain his throne. That's how North and South were created. The King of England, again, more power. We want more control over this new land. So the King of England wanted complete control of the Atlantic. So all this area, he wanted to control it himself. But remember from the last lesson that this little area right here, it was controlled by the Dutch. They settled there to trade with the natives, but it was called New Amsterdam. But the King of England offered to buy it from the Dutch in order so that he could control all of this area right here. And he named it New York. It was named New York because York is a town in England. And the person that was running it was King George, the future King George, who was the Duke of York. So that's why it's called New York. New Jersey became a royal colony. So the king is starting to get more and more control of these colonies that are rising. William Penn was another noble that the king was a friend of, and he was also given the land of Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, he made it again a safe haven for religious groups, especially the Quakers, because they were being persecuted in other groups. The Quaker is a form of religion, and they made Pennsylvania a safe haven for them, and he named it after himself. So William Penn founded Pennsylvania. Delaware, right below Pennsylvania, was separated from Pennsylvania and became its own colony. It attempted to attract settlers from Europe. So remember, all these colonies are trying to get people from Europe to come over. They're trying to promote themselves and sell themselves, because the more people that are here, the more successful the colony is. And the last colony was in 1732. This Georgia right here was the last colony that was established. All 13 were established by 1732. And it came to be for 2 main reasons. So Georgia came to be for 3 main reasons. Number 1, it served as a buffer state to protect South Carolina. So South Carolina right here was very profitable. They had a lot of tobacco, a lot of sugar. So it made a lot of money for the crown. So in order to protect it, King George, get it, created the colony of Georgia in order to protect their investment. So that was one reason why it was created. Reason number 2, it was a debtors colony, which means that in England, the prisons were getting super overcrowded by people that couldn't pay back. So they went into debtors prisons, which means that you owe money. So King George was like, let's relieve some of the pressure here in England, and let's send these debtors, these bad people, over to the New World so that they could just get out of the way and be there. So you send the bad people over here to the Americas. And we're going to talk about this as we move on in future lessons. So thank you very much.